Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Nightlight. We're having storms all over the place here, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my guest, whom is spectacular, and I am so excited that I talked her into coming onto the show. Her name is Mary Sutherland, and she's an author and researcher focusing her work on consciousness studies, ancient history, and unusual phenomena. She is a hands-on researcher, and her website provides us with hundreds of pages of information on the paranormal, UFOs, ancient races and their cultures, sacred sites, and PowerPoints of the world, underground tunnels and cave systems, dimensional worlds, and metaphysics. And in her spare time, the governor of Kentucky has commissioned her as a Kentucky colonel for her work on the ancient sites of Kentucky. For the last 5 years, she's been exploring, mapping, and documenting the ancient underwater structures of Rock Lake near Aztalan. And for the last 14 years, she's been documenting the ancient sites around Burlington, Wisconsin. Truth is her passion. She believes it is through truth that we will break ourselves free of our present entanglements of life. She's written a ton of books. A ton for me. She's written many books. They're all available on her website, which is www.burlingtonnews.net. And they are also available on Amazon.com. All you have to do is type in her name. That's Mary Sutherland. And you will find all of the books that she has written. She's an amazing lady. I've read 2 of her books, and I have to admit, I'm going to have to go back and read them over and over and over again, because she is just so phenomenal as far as her research. She is I don't want to call her a fanatic, but I will tell you she is very, very thorough, and she has managed to link so much together that I never realized it linked. And she has certainly put a sense of she's put a sense of order to history on a level and to a degree that I have never imagined possible. I have to admit, she has hit a number of topics that for me have been fascinating over the years. And I have to say that she has gone so much more deeply into so many of the aspects of things that I have become fascinated with, that it's unbelievable. I think that when it comes to research, when it comes to digging, she does not. There is no one that is her equal. She's managed to chronicle time, as it were. And in that chronicling of time, she has managed to create a sense and put things in proper perspective. She goes back 35,000 years. Well, not herself, of course, but she's gone that far back in time. And she's put sense to a lot of the things that all of us have kind of looked at and wondered, where does that fit in? How does that fit in? And especially with one of my favorite topics, which as soon as in case you didn't notice, I am stretching because we're having trouble contacting her. She's there and ready to come on, and we just aren't being able to make the connection. I think both Mary and Deb have amazing storms going on in their areas, so the weather is not exactly helping us here, but 2 of my favorite subjects that Mary has dug into and made a lot of sense out of. One of them is giants, of course, which is one of my favorite subjects these days. I have been fascinated with them. I've often wondered why we aren't putting the giants in the proper perspective, the proper time frame in our history, and a little upset because I have grandchildren that are learning history now, and it's a little upsetting to me that the giants are ignored totally. Not only are they ignored in history, but the fact that many of the famous people that we do study about in ancient history were giants. Another of the topics that Mary touches on, and we're going to expand upon as soon as we get her on, is the fact that Atlantis actually was existed here. Deb, yes? Deb?
I'm trying to get her in. I dialed her. I don't know how it's going. She says there's lots of storms overhead. I wasn't ignoring you. I was on the phone with her.
Oh, is she on with you now?
I was just trying to bring her in through the to the station right now. It's delicate connecting.
But this is why, everybody, you have a producer, because you can calmly sit here while she sweats up a storm someplace trying to make things happen. No way in heck there was going to be Barbara producing the show, because you would just hear me cursing and crying, and I'm pretty sure they'd take me off the air real fast. Deb, you just jump in and tell me when you actually have her. I do want to go into two of her books, which are just amazing, and I highly recommend people read them. The Red-Haired Giants, Atlantis in North America, and Giants, Gods, and Lost Races. Hello. I promise. I think Deb is calling her. Is that what that noise was, Deb?
Probably. I was trying to, everything I'm trying to do to get her in, it doesn't seem to be sticking well. Okay, I'll try again another way.
Okay. Both of these books take history and chronicle it. And often when I was in school, and you know how when you're in the lower grades, they study the Norse gods, and you study the Greek gods and the Roman gods, and you know, some other ones thrown in here and there. There are similarities between all of them, and you kind of wonder, were they the same gods, or you know, were these different gods at different times? Or and Mary makes sense of all of this, and I don't want to step on her dialogue, because she probably puts it a lot better than I can. But a lot of the things that I wondered about as a child that the history books did not take care of, Mary has kind of put in an order, in a way, so that it makes sense, and it feels right. Lots of times things that are myths, you know, we've often been told that fables and myths are just history waiting to be proven. And that appears to be what Mary Sutherland has done. She has brought a lot of the myths and the mysteries and explained them so that they have become a more real part of what could possibly be history. And it was a pleasure to read her books. I'm going to have to go back and read them again, because I actually want to do a timeline with all of this on it. I want to be able to put things in proper perspective. I'm more of a let me see it person. So a timeline that stretches out, going back, oh, I don't know, 10, 12,000 years ago, so that I have an idea as to when certain things happened. And, one of my biggest peeves is, of course, the Native Americans and the giants. I know there were giants in this country. I know they've been discovered. I know that the bones are out there. And jeepers, I'm wondering if that's her. I think it is.
This is Mary.
Mary, is that you? Oh, thank God.
Me.
We're
having a heck of a storm here. I thought at first maybe a tornado was hitting, but it seems, I think that there might have been a tornado at some place, but it didn't hit here. But we've got a lot of lightning and thunder and wind, so hopefully we'll be able to get this show going and continue it.
Well, I have given you one of the longest introductions I've ever given anybody.
Well, thank you.
And I am so glad that we can finally roll up our sleeves, and really we have many similar areas that we both are fascinated with. So I'm really excited about, especially the giant stuff, which has been one of my things that has fascinated me over the last 4 or 5 years. And a lot of the material I got from Patrick and because he was a biblical theologian, and so he was into the giants of the Bible. And then when we got into the megalithic stuff, they were digging up giant bones, and I kept saying, if all of these giants did indeed exist, then why aren't they in our history books?
Well, I guess for the reason that the government covers up just about everything that, everything that's out there. I mean, they say history belongs to the conqueror. And, when when countries come in and take over another country, they take over they replace the history with the history that they want to use to control the people and to follow their agendas. And I'm sure that probably in the 1800s, or mid-1800s, by the start of the Industrial Revolution, I think it had been, that, they just they figured they could probably put out anything they wanted to, because who would have thought that there was going to be such a thing as the Internet, where everything could be checked out, so, they just wrote the books according to their agendas and probably figured that everybody would go along with it. But, surprise, surprise.
The thought that
the internet came, internet came about, and people had easy and quick access to all this information around the world, on an individual basis. One researcher contacted another researcher saying, hey, what do you got? Well, this is what I got. What do you got? Then we get on Facebook and, the different our websites and that, and we put it out there. And, basically the people have changed the history back to, or trying to get the history back to where it originally was.
Well, I think one of the most interesting things is, when theoretically the Pilgrims arrived, the only people here were little random tribes of Indians, and that wasn't true. I mean, the Indian nations were amazing, and prior to that, the giants were here, and they had an amazing culture, and it was all over North America and even into South America. I mean, they were all over the world, but they almost seem to have been sort of herded into North America. It feels like they were driven out of everywhere else, and they ended up here to have...
Well, I don't think they ended up here. I think they started here.
Okay.
When you go back to the history of Pangea, it shows one big mass of, one large landmass.
Mm-hmm.
And then came a time when there was a great cataclysm of sorts, which caused the mountains to rise and the land to separate. And if you go back into the ancient maps, or go back to the days of Pangea, the maps there, you'll actually see that if you take all the countries that we have, South America, Africa, Europe, Egypt, and that you could actually take every one of those pieces and push them together. And they fit, if you push them all together as one piece, they actually, it looks like a jigsaw puzzle, and it just kind of, you put those all together as one, and they fit right into, the other landmass.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, and you take, actually, I got a website, burlingtonnews.net/maps, MAPS. And I've got this little automated thing there where you could take your mouse, put it onto this this illustration, automated illustration, and it will open. It will pull the plates out. Well, you start with Pangea, Then you pull the plates out, and it'll take you right up to where these plates fit in
What's
present
the what,
time.
what's
But then
the
you can
time?
push it all back together again, and you'll see that Africa, Morocco, fits perfectly into the New Jersey area.
Mm-hmm.
And then Egypt fits perfectly up into the Montauk, New York area. And so when they say that, when history says that mankind began in Africa, they're not lying, but they're not telling the whole truth either. Because you can take those pieces and push them right together, and you can see the eastern coast of the United States fits perfectly with the landmass of Africa and Egypt.
Now,
And there was no Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic Ocean came about after after these plates separated out. And that, where the separation was, water filled everything in, thus we got the Atlantic Ocean. But we know that Atlantis was then, was already operating at that point in time of Pangea.
What was the time
So
frame
when
for
you have,
Pangea?
well,
How many thousand
I
years
hate putting together, I really hate putting together timelines.
Okay.
But because they've been messed with so much that I kind of go, how I date things is I go according to events.
Okay.
What was going on in these particular times. But I would assume that Atlantis probably had, I think that the end of Atlantis as a civilization was around 10,500 BC, 11,000 BC.
Okay.
But how long it was there prior to that could have been 30,000, 50,000, maybe even a million years. We don't know.
Okay.
But what I'm getting at is you'll hear a lot of researchers say, well, Atlantis was in the Atlantis Ocean. That's where you get the name of, the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
But it can't be, because the Atlantic Ocean wasn't there during the time of Atlantis.
Amazing.
And you can see that illustrated on that website that I gave you.
And this was a culture of giants.
Yeah, everything was giants in those days.
Okay.
Because we know that the people, the giants, existed back in the Jurassic period for sure. Because we have evidence of tracks of these giant human footprints walking next to dinosaur prints. We found those down there in Pulaski River down in Texas. We've also found the same type of prints in Arizona, in northern Arizona. So we know, and then there's other places around the world that shows, dinosaur prints and human footprints. We've also found pottery, showing humans drawing dinosaurs on their pottery. We've seen dinosaurs depicted on cave walls and things like that. So we know, there's no guesswork on that. I mean, that's evidence. But now think about this. Now we're going to go back to biblical history, okay? And biblical history is interesting and factual if you understand how to read it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because, it's like the layers of an onion. You just there's truth, but you got to keep pulling it back, and pulling it back. The more you peel off the onion, the more information you get.
Right.
It's stories hidden within stories, hidden within stories. But in Genesis, it said that man was the caretakers of the animals. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So the animals were, so it'd be in the 7 days of creation. So within those 7 days of creation, the animals were created, man was created, and then on the seventh day he rested. Now, we know that there was dinosaurs. Now, during the Pangea period, or Jurassic period, that probably is what they were referring to in the Bible. But why would, because we know that man was there then, okay, because we've got that with the evidence of the footprints.
Well, not only that, don't we have it with cave drawings too?
Oh, yeah. But what I'm getting at, though, is, people, what we do is we just take information for granted. It's all based on, we've been indoctrinated to believe authorities. We believe our teachers, we believe our parents, we believe our religious instructors, et cetera, et cetera. So when they tell us something, we just naturally take it as a fact.
Mm-hmm.
We don't check into it. So, but if you do put your thinking hat on, and you go back to that day, and those days, other dinosaurs, these giant ferns, giant trees, giant animals, why would God have made man 5'4"?
Right.
And then placed him as caretakers of the animals? How could man have why would he have even made man so small and expect for man to be able to survive?
Yeah, couldn't have.
They couldn't have. It's not giving, certainly God, it wasn't giving them a fair playing ground, right? But we know but based on evidence that we found, we know that did not happen. The footprints we're finding way back during the Jurassic period were footprints of giants.
Mm-hmm.
And we found giant footprints, all over the world.
Yes.
So we know, it's no longer a guess, it's a fact. And we know that as animals decreased in size, birds decreased in size, man decreased in size as well. Mm-hmm. So now what we have is, what we have today. We got some tall things like the giraffe and the elephant and that, but basically, whatever type of animals we have, our sizes are basically the same.
Yeah, we're proportionate.
Proportionate, yes. So okay. So now, So if it went back to the time of Pangea, and it was one land, and we know that man was here before the mountains raised.
Okay.
And when the mountains raised was at the same time as Pangea. So it has to be the same period of time. And if that's the case, then the landmass. That's why we have the same world history, is because man came from one place, then separated out. When the landmass is shifted.
That makes sense.
But when they say that Africa was the motherland of civilization of man, okay.
The cradle, yeah.
North America toenailed Africa. So whatever, if they're giving that as the cradle, Africa as the cradle of civilization, then the east coast of North America was too. Has to be. You just can't get around it.
And
thus, if that's the case, and we've got these giant footprints along with the dinosaur, and then we can go back to the ancient Vedic texts of the Mahabharata, Puranas, and that. And they even talk about North America as being the land of the gods, the land of the giants.
Wow.
And they talk about the beautiful, or they write about the beautiful palaces that was here in North America, that was built to receive, the different princes and things, emissaries that were coming to North America. And it even talks about Krishna being in North America, visiting royalty that was here. And they speak about, I think it's in my book, Red-Haired Giants. Yeah, I'm sure it is. In my book, Red-Haired Giants, I even found evidence from these. There was a book that was written by I don't have the book in front of me, but it's based off this book that I found in Kentucky when I was down there, researching and trying to find ancient Atlantean temples. And but anyhow, I came across a book, a very old book, that was actually written by this person that had been commissioned by, believe it or not, the Smithsonian Institute to write about the ancient history of Kentucky and the Appalachian area. And now this was paid for by the Smithsonian. And in that book, it tells that in the Appalachian Mountains was where it was the territory of Atlan, and that this was the great empire of Atlan, which would be Atlantis.
Yeah, and then is that how the Atlantis got its name?
I would imagine anything that you find with ATL, or a version of that, is usually, you can look at it and see it as basically a reference, to pointing to Atlantis. But they talk about that. But so anyhow, and it also talks about how they were giants. And so we know that the giants had that the whole country of North America was the home of the giants, also home of the gods. And they talk in the they write in the Mahabharata, I believe it is, that they talk about what was it? Lightning just struck here, so I kind of lost my train of thought.
No problem.
But they talk about, oh gosh, I lost it. Like I said, I lost my train of thought.
It'll come back.
Yeah, it will.
The giants.
I hate that when that happens.
Nah,
but,
I always say it was a local. It'll come back.
Yeah. But anyhow, it goes in, and it talks about, that. Oh, I know what it was. They referred to these gods and giants, or they called them Magi. And you hear references of the Magi in the stories of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's pronounced Magi, though. I'm not sure. But it's where magic comes from. It's the root word of magic. And they talk about how they had these strange powers of levitation and, and they could do all these wonders. And so anyhow, if you get it, if people buy my book, I have it all in there. I did a book or a series of books in search of ancient man, based on I don't know, about 15, 20 years, close to, of information that I accumulated from rare and lost books.
Mm-hmm.
And then also I used I went around and talked to talked to people on the various legends, and scientific papers, just a whole accumulation of notes. And I was going to write a book on giants, but I had so much information that I said to my husband, I said, how am I going to write this book? I said, there's just too much. He says, do it as a volume, a series. And so I ended up with a 5-book series, In Search of Ancient Man. And through that, I had the most amazing work that you have ever come across, because I did not want to use the information that I could find on the internet, because it's like the news. How the one station will have the same news and they just put a different spin on it, and then another news picks it up, puts another spin on it. I didn't want to go that way. What I wanted to do was find information that had been lost, to the public, hidden from the public. And that's what I did. I just accumulated all this information, and then I put it into book form. So the information I have in my books, the only way you're going to find it on the internet is if somebody had already copied it from me. Because a lot of the information, through the years, I have a burlingtonnews.net, and, through all these years, I have put a lot of my research onto those websites. So, so I tried to share as much information as I could prior to, getting it in book format. But so now it's available on the internet as well as in book format.
Well, I loved how you took all of the Norse gods, the Roman gods, the Greek gods, and all of them, and explained how they were all a reflection of the same God. And and that's amazing.
Well, that's what gets confusing. It's because, I know it did for me when I first started doing research, because I'd start studying one country, and they'd have all these names for these gods, like Poseidon, or whatever. And then you get to Egypt, and you're hearing Osiris, and then and then Buddha, and that, and it's just like, so but they have kind of the same story, and it's like, well, how can that be? So there for a long time, I just took the information, put it all together, and then after a while it started making sense, and I realized that what it was the same story, and it was the same God. It's just that country took that history and applied it to their country simply by changing the name.
Yeah.
And it just added so much confusion for everyone. And then another thing they did to make the story jive, or their religion to jive with the story, is they would change the dates.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I don't like using dates in my books. I do to a certain point, just to, for a little bit of clarity. But I usually like to go with events happening around the world at that specific time, so that people can see, okay, well, this was happening. She's not giving a date, but over there in Egypt, this is happening. But I see also that in North America, almost the same thing was going on, especially when I get into the stories of the War of the Gods. It was the same war. And then, like people, they, when, during the time of, Egypt struggles, well, to find out at the same point in time, guess what? They were having struggles in Greece with Troy. It was a world war, and it was happening in North America too. And so the Great Trojan War was actually a great battle that took place during the time of Atlantis. It was the Atlantean Wars. And this is one of the final battles. So when I could get that into my books, as a reference point, then all these other battles and struggles people were having, and battles of gods and things and angels fighting demons, it all started to make sense. They were all relating the same story.
Yeah, different cultures.
And over and over again, changing dates and changing names.
So the different cultures just adapted the story to their culture.
Right.
And made it a part of their history.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And it got so confusing. People, it's like, I've probably been studying this for almost 20 years, and it's like, but for, even, myself, when I first started out, it was very difficult for me to make tales of what was going on. So yeah, so people, they just said, I can't do this. So, well, I'm just going to go to church on Sundays. I'll let the minister tell me. I'll let the priest tell me. How convenient for them, because they had the answers. Then, of course, if you had a question, well, you can't do that because you can't question God because it's a sin. There, in one of my books, I tell about, with the Great Flood, and how the water level at one point in time had been almost taken to the very peaks of the tallest mountains. And so people in the 1800s, they're finding on top of these mountains seashells. Yeah. And it was like, well, wait a minute. So they go to the church and they say, well, we're finding seashells at the top of these mountains and these high hills and that, and we're finding them in the desert. And in my book, I say how these religious leaders would look at them and say, hey, that's the devil trying to trick you.
Yeah.
Because that's just a trick so that you question God.
Now, and
people say, oh, okay, I'm sorry. And that was the end of it. How simple life was for the religious leaders during that time. And up in North America, it was up until the middle of the 1800s that the people here in North America believed that the ancient Hindu were the mound builders.
Yeah.
The ancient Brahmins were the mound builders. The earthen mounds and the temples that they were coming across. And they were correct. They were right. But history back then got changed, because they wanted to give credit. Because first of all, they wanted people to believe that the Indians were subhumans.
Yeah.
Children of the devil. So to justify, to put the fear and the hatred into people's hearts, like they're doing now with Islam and that, put the fear and the hatred in people's hearts so that they could easily kill them off, and take the land. Okay? But then finally came a time where, the agenda changed. And they didn't need to kill off the Indians because they already had their land, right?
Yeah.
So they gave credit to the Indians for these mounds and these temples that people were coming across. They said, oh, well, the Indians made those, which wasn't true because it was the ancient Brahmins, the ancient Hindu, the ones that wrote the Mahabharata, the people that were responsible for telling about Krishna being here in North America, and, these different dignitaries, from the Far East and all around the world. So anyhow, they gave the credit to the Indians. So they changed history. But I found in my research on the red-haired giants, down in the Burlington area, I had heard a story because we have mounds there and a flat stepped or a stepped flat top pyramid, which is actually as big as Cahokias.
Wow.
I mean, this thing is huge. It's big old bed and breakfast that sits on top of it now.
Oh my gosh.
You know, which is really cool because it's the only place in the world that you can actually spend the night on top of a pyramid. I've done it too, and boy, I'll tell you.
And the energy should be amazing.
Oh my God, the energy. After I was on top of that, after I spent the night in that bed and breakfast up there, and I came off of it, you know, and went back to work at the cafe, I couldn't be around people for 3 days.
I can believe it.
It was their energy. It did something to my energy that it was just like a person get close to me is like fingernails going down a blackboard.
Well, now aren't most of those structures built on vortexes and
Oh yeah, for sure. People tell me, they say, well, how do you find these vortexes, these portals to the other dimensions? I say it's simple. All you do is you find these mounds, you know. And these pyramids, these temples here in North America, wherever you find them, because that's what they do is they would use, first of all, they were using them for the energy, but they were also putting these temples on them too to mark these spots as energy points. You know, exactly. So I cheat. I just go and I find the mounds, and it's like, okay, I just found a vortex, you know, and I start photographing it and everything else like that. But going back to my story, okay, so when I get to Burlington, I find, you know, all these structures, you know, and so I started asking around, and somebody, and I found out that the old local Indian lore said that when the Indians got to this area, this would be southeastern Wisconsin, when the Indians got to that particular area, they came across a race of people that was already living there, Caucasian in color, red-haired giants.
Wow.
And they called them, the Kokodesh. No, Hukadesh. I'm sorry. Hukadesh. Okay? And I'm thinking, wow, Hukadesh. What is, I've heard that name before. Well, Hu is color, right? Or, you know, but Kodesh is the Battle of Kadesh.
Ah.
With, what would it have been? Was it, Ramses, I believe it was, Ramses II? Had the big battle with the Hittites with on is like the border there. They were fighting over it, and it was called Kadesh. So it was a great battle of Kadesh. But then when I thought, now how would the Indians, you know, have known about the Egyptian, Israelite, Hittite name of Kadesh if they hadn't really seen these people? They could have just pulled it out of the air, you know. So, okay, so now I know that there's a Kadesh. But then, you know, I started studying on the word Kadesh, because I'm thinking, well, where did the Hittites get the name Kadesh? Right? So I backtracked it, and I finally took it all the way back to Atlantis. And Kadesh is the Atlantean term for the Ark of the Covenant. Moses did not have the original. The original was given to the Atlanteans from the star gods. It was a covenant that they had made as a promise that they would always be there to protect them.
Amazing.
So here we got this ancient name. Takes it all the way back to Atlantis, traces back around into Israel or Egypt, and with the Egyptians and the Hittites. and then lands up in southeastern Wisconsin, right? So anyhow, I'm checking this out, and then because I have a friend that he teaches, I think what's that called, etymology? I think it's etymology, the study of words.
Etymology.
I think that's it. Ephonology?
Yeah, it's ET.
Or is it? I think it is it. Is it EP or ET?
ET, I think.
Yeah, etymology. Anyhow, it's the study of words. And he told me, and he's a professor, I believe at Harvard. But anyhow, he used to call me up and talk to me all the time, on private studies, teaching me how to use these words. Because he told me, he says, Mary, the English words is a coded language for the Atlanteans. So you look for the root.
Mm-hmm.
And within that root lies the story, okay? So that's how, knowing this is how I started, checking out Kadesh. But now, also, there was a river that went through the Burlington area called the Fox River. Do I talk a lot? But anyhow, there's this river that goes through the Burlington area called the Fox River. Well, that's not the original name. The original name was Pishtaka. Pishtaka was, and that's what the Indians called it, Pishtaka. And anyhow, I checked that out, and Pishtaka is a Brahmin name. Okay? And meaning rice. And when Lewis and Clark came down through this area, they also wrote about this river of rice, which would be in Brahmin terms, Pishtaka, rice river, right? So now here we got these Indians again, talking about the Pishtaka River. Well, how the heck they know Brahmin if they were the original people, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so now I'm thinking on that, and I'm thinking Brahmin. And so I started, but I can place this now back in the time of Abraham, right? Also, because Abraham was the father of all nations, right?
Right.
So I got to playing with Abraham. And now this is where, oh my gosh, my brain is not functioning tonight. I use that word all the time too. But, it's like gosh darn, anagram. It's an anagram, okay? Abraham is an anagram. Because if you take the A off the front of Abraham and put it in the back, you have Brahma.
That's quite.
And he was the father of all nations. He was Brahmin.
Right.
Okay, so Brahmin was ancient Hindu.
Okay.
Which used the Brahmin language, and that's where the Pishtaka River came from, and that's where the Hokadesh, the name Hokadesh, comes from. And then I followed it up with the local Mormon history. Because the brass plates were found there. The golden plates that started the Mormon religion was found in the hill of Qumran. Okay, Ra for sun god in New York.
Would this sort of also go to the fact that in the Grand Canyon there are mountains that all have Egyptian names?
Yes, exactly. It wasn't Egyptian; it was Brahmin.
Okay.
Because Buddha, they found Buddha statues in those in those caves, in the Grand Canyon.
Right.
And like I said, up until the mid 1800s, the people here in North America believed that this land once was controlled by the Hindu. And so, and it just went back and forth. And it's just, and then I also found because a lot of people, when they start doing research on what ancient America was, what they do is they go to Google and they type ancient America or ancient United States of America.
Yeah.
But they don't realize that there were so many other names that America had before it was given the name America. And one of the names was Pushkara. Pushakara. Pushkara.
Uh-huh.
That's a Brahmin name.
Hmm.
And what were these Brahmins? It went back to the times of, we do know that they went back to the times of Abraham. And we also, and while I'm doing all this, and I'm studying up on the fact that, that the chances are where you're going to find Atlantis is right up there in the Nova Scotia area, come right on down to the East Coast, right down through there, up into the Appalachian Mountains. That was their territory. And then, of course, when, the plates separated, then it was filled in with water, which became the Atlantic. So most of the evidence of Atlantis would be now, today, found under the Atlantic Ocean. So in a way, there wasn't really lying,
Yeah.
but they wasn't really telling the truth either, because Atlantis used to be in Pangaea. Then the plates separated out, and there was a portion of the eastern coast that sunk underneath the water, as it did in every other country as well. So, and Atlantis was a world trade. So it's just, sometimes it's just common sense thinking. Because look at, if something happened to our world today, and I don't know, 1,000 years later, somebody rediscovered, North America, they'd probably think that this was owned by China because we bought so much from China. And you see all this Chinese stuff on it, right? Labels. So same way with Atlantis. It was a world trade. So you're going to see evidence of Atlantis in Greece and Egypt and Europe and Africa and all over. But according to the ancient texts, you go right on back to those ancient texts, the Mahabharata, the Purana, and that, and all of them. You can even find it in the Grecian history, of North America being the land of the gods, the home of Atlantis. So that's what I've been doing. Everybody else is out there, the government gives them grants and stuff as long as they keep their research out of North America. The archaeologists, they get their grant money and they go out there and they dig around, they find something, but they found, usually they've got some sort of a non-disclosure paper that they've had to fill out. So if they did find anything, taking it back to North America, the people would never know about it.
Yeah, and I'm afraid they don't. I mean, the fact that the Iroquois Nation was so huge, and they don't talk about that. There's a book 1491 and 1492, and it's about just how massive the empires were that the Indians.
But that's what like the red-haired giants. That's all. That tells you the whole history of the giants and how the Iroquois Nation came about, the battle between the giants and the Iroquois, the Confederacy, takes it all the way on through how the Iroquois Nation was so large that eventually they had to break it down into tribes, in order to govern it.
We've got a 5-minute great guest here tonight. I have Mary Sutherland with me, and we are connecting historical dots and trying to make sense of what history hasn't really told us. And it's quite a journey. Welcome back, Mary.
Okay. Now, hold on just a second. Okay, it gave me a chance to let my dog out to go to the bathroom. Now, if I may, what I'd like to do is shock your listeners.
Oh, please
or at
do.
least not shock them so much as to get their brain turning, okay?
Okay.
Because you know how everybody is afraid of the Nephilim?
Yes.
You know, they say that the Nephilim are of Satan. You know, everything's a Nephilim, right? Well, what would you say, or what would your listeners say, if I have evidence, or evidence to show that the people that we most fear, well, of course, we know that the giants were called Nephilims too, but the people that we most fear, the Nephilim, may be us.
Well, I would agree with you, but I'm sure they wouldn't. So shock away.
Okay, so first of all, I want to, now let's see. Now I'm going to read a little bit of this, because of the fact that it is something, that people are going to want to know about and want me to show them, what I've got, to prove this.
Sure.
Okay, first of all, with Noah, we're going to go right to Noah. And remember, in the biblical, it says Noah was chosen because he was seen by God as his blood not being corrupted with sin, or he was without sin. Okay, you remember reading about that? Or that was the excuse that why he was chosen by God? But as you will soon understand, without sin was not a question of good and evil, but bloodline. Noah was a giant Nephilim. And after the flood, he and his family went on to produce a line of Anunnaki desirables, or, quote, chosen ones, unquote. So when you hear people talk about the chosen ones, this is what it's all about. The Muhammad tradition has it that the giant Og, king of Bashan, was Noah's nephew, the son of Noah's sister. And according to Jewish legend, Noah saved Og from the flood by making a place for him near the lattice door of the ark. The giant Magog was also the grandson of Noah. And then I'm going to kind of skip ahead. Let's just go on. As the story goes, the book of Enoch states that Enoch's son Methuselah brought to his son Lamech a woman for him to marry. All through her pregnancy, Lamech believed the child his wife was carrying was his, but upon birth, Lamech realized that something was very wrong. The child did not even look like him, and to top it off, he was like that of the Nephilim. The child was described as being born with skin as white as the fallen snow. His hair was as white as sheep's wool, and his eyes were so brilliant that they were like the sun that illuminated their home. In the blood of Lamech, scraps of which have been recovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls, Noah was so physically different when he was born. Lamech appealed to his father, who in turn asked Enoch whether or not Noah had been conceived by the Nephilim. Lamech went to Methuselah and said, I have begotten a son unlike other children. He is not human, but resembles the offspring of heaven. He is of a different nature, being altogether unlike us. His eyes are bright as the rays of the sun, his countenance glorious. He doesn't look as if he belongs to me, but to the angels. Lamech pleaded with Methuselah to go talk to Enoch and find out the truth about his wife and this unusual child. At length, Enoch was finally found at the extremities of the earth, which I think was probably North America, and told of Noah. Although Enoch assured him that Noah was the child of Lamech and that there was no deception, a red flag goes up when Enoch further comments that the children of Noah would beget giants upon the earth. Enoch says, this child who is born to you shall survive on the earth, and his son shall be saved with him. When mankind on the earth die, he shall be saved, and his posterity shall beget on the earth giants, not spiritual, but carnal. Therefore, inform Lamech that he who is born is his child, and he shall call his name Noah, for he shall be to you a survivor. With the birth of Noah, a plan for the destruction of earth and its surviving bloodline was put into play. And so it was, through the descendants of Noah, a line of elected ones were born who created secret societies that moved among the masses, communicating with one another through secret codes and symbols. And I also have other, stories in here, about Noah being, of this chosen race. But so it had nothing to do with the sin had nothing to do with anything. Corruption of this, was without corruption. What it was is that they were introducing a new bloodline, and that was Noah's.
Okay. And well, now St. Patrick was also a giant. A lot of the people in our biblical history, especially, were giants, and they don't talk about them that much. I know that in the Thoth material, Thoth it talked about the small humans, so that you have to assume that Thoth and his followers were also giants, and of course with the Egyptian stuff, all of the big statues, I swear, are life-size statues. They weren't meant to be exaggerated, so that there are statues of giants, and people don't even realize that they were the giants that were building pyramids and stuff like that.
Sure. And then I think if you look at this with the story of Noah, and that they were introducing a new bloodline, a Nephilim bloodline from the Anunnaki, it seems to me like you had two sets of giants born. One was the original set, that they talk about in Genesis, going back to the days of Pangea. All right, where we found the footprints of the giant humans walking with dinosaurs. But then there was another set of giants that the Anunnaki introduced through Noah.
Okay.
And then there's another thing that I had come across. I have it in the book, and it's about let's see. It's about According to the book of Genesis, after the deluge, when Noah drank too much wine, he collapsed in his tent in a drunken stupor. His son Ham entered and saw his father naked and told his two brothers, who proceeded to go back into the tent with a cloth and covered the naked Noah. Finding out that Ham had seen him naked, Noah loses all sense of reason and puts a curse on him and his son Canaan. One must have to question as to why he had such an irrational reaction to his son seeing him naked. Was it because Ham saw the vestige of his reptilian heritage? Could Ham have seen his father, the sign of the Nephilim, which appeared as a large badge-like area of scaly skin or hide on his chest? This patch of scaly skin is also mentioned in the Hindu classics. In the Mahabharata, one of the demigods, Karna, is born of the sun god, Surya, and an earth mother. As such, he is born clad in a coat of armor like a divine being. Just as Hindu sun god was Karna's father, the same may have been true of Melchizedek, who is also called Adoni Zedek, meaning my lord is Zedek. Zedek was the Hebrew name for the Roman sun god Jupiter. The tradition of the priesthood of Melchizedek is entirely dropped from the Old Testament and instead is vested in Aaron, brother of Moses, later to be replaced by the tribe of Levi or Levites. The priesthood of Melchizedek was kept alive, however, by the Mormons, who gave his tradition precedence over all other priests in the scriptures. So, a scaly patch of skin.
Mm-hmm.
because see, it never made sense to me as why Ham would have been, and his children would have been so cursed.
Yeah.
Unless they were keeping, Ham had seen something on his father that nobody else saw, which gave away his true identity, which would have been, again, the Nephilim blood, which, of course, in ancient texts shows reptilian, scaly skin, is a scaly skin. And we still, but what this patch of scaly skin is, I don't really know. The only thing I can think of that we have that's scaly skinned, is maybe possibly psoriasis. Maybe psoriasis comes from, maybe it's a genetical flaw, from
if you
the
look at
Anunnakis or something.
If you look at the giants themselves, they were fair skinned, they were red haired. There were other identifying criteria. They had extra digits on their hands and their feet. They had double rows of teeth, so that it may well have been a genetic screw up. Because when the fetus is developing, there are times when it is almost fish-like. So you almost kind of wonder if scales could have been something that could have happened, being a skin condition. And
well, I've seen in some Mayan drawings, of this god, that is a giant that is looking down on one of the priests, and he looks reptilian. He's got the scaly skin and a long tail, and we're born into, not born, but as we're developing, we have that. We have a tail. The fetus does, then the tail falls away prior to birth. But we always had that little indentation, right below, our spine. Yeah.
Well, and but today it's interesting because I know people who have the fair skin, the reddish hair, double rows of teeth, extra digits. And somebody did contact Patrick when he was alive. He had Matrix Radio. A woman, actually from Michigan, called up and said that she was sure that she was of one of the tribes of Ireland, and she went on to tell us that everybody in her family had the fair hair, the fair skin, the red hair, the extra digits, and double rows of teeth. And she wanted to know if that could be that they were genetically linked to the tribes of giants. And I do believe that gene is something that many carry more obviously than others.
Yeah, I call it, not call it, but, I think what it is, it's a recessive gene that, it's always there. It's like our DNA. We have everything in that DNA from the time we were created.
Right.
And so you'll see, people being born with this recessive gene, from the giants, where, they have the double rows of teeth, the 6 digits, the red hair. And we also have blonde hair, but the red hair, I believe that the red-haired giants comes from the line of Cain, and the line of Dan. Well, see, Dan is Cain. That's another anagram, because the D and the C can be interchanged. Because remember, the Egyptians, they only used, they took out all vowels so that they could put them in as they chose, but it would have the same meaning. So Dan is Don, is Den, Sweden, and all those places like that. The mark of Cain, they always would call things by Dan or Jen or Cain or whatever.
Yeah.
But wherever you find those places, that's where you also find that red-haired trait. And it doesn't really make any difference what color your skin is, because I've seen people of color, black, brown, red, having freckles.
Well,
So I'm,
yeah, but
to me it's the freckles that count, not the color of the skin so much, because the freckles is that recessive gene coming out from the line of Dan.
I mean, wouldn't the double rows of teeth and the extra digits be a dead giveaway?
Well, sure. There's no doubt about it. But I think a lot of people think that, you got to have that, that white skin, and that's not necessarily true now when it comes to a recessive gene. And then, of course, there's lost races, too, because we've found in North America, complete graveyards of little people with their little tools and everything buried with them. I have a website, burlingtonnews.net/little people, and I have a list by state of where all these little graveyards or burial places that these little people have been found. And I think that, the little people that you have today, that we used to call midgets, but we don't do that because it's not
socially appropriate.
But I think that that's a recessive gene,
Oh, yeah.
And
well, don't you think in a way that I would say all of the myths that have been passed down through hundreds, thousands of years, they Patrick used to say a myth is only a fact waiting to be proven, and so the fairies and the fae and the jinn and all of them actually I do believe existed and still may in some form exist today. So
well, I photographed them. I know for a fact, when you go into the stories, of Ireland, and the British Isles and that, they talk about the tooth fairy on. And they're your red-headed giants. They came from the people of Dan, the tribe of Dan, and they talk about how there was great battles, and they disappeared into the mounds. They live within the hills, and nobody can see them, but they have the ability to become or make themselves invisible. They have the ability to shapeshift. And so, we have Bigfoot too. I really think that, if they're going to, they found evidence of Gigantothepus. I think that's how you pronounce it. But they found skeletal remains of them. And they want to call them apes, but they find tools with them. Most of the time that they don't report. But, they were using tools. There's been a lot of findings with these giants that they call the Gigantothepus. But I'm thinking that if they want to go that direction, with that, then they best be redefining the name or the term ape, because it doesn't fit. And and I think that Bigfoot, if you look at them, they're 7-8 foot tall, and they're among us. There's more than enough evidence today to prove that the Bigfoot do exist. And you can go all the way back into the creation stories of the Anunnaki when they were creating a slave race. They were using the wild hairy man of the forest, and so you got it there. And then if you go into the stories of the epic of Gilgamesh, it talks about the goddess went out because Gilgamesh was lonely because he was a giant and everybody else was small, and he needed companionship. So the goddess went out into the forest and found the wild hairy man that had always been there as a guardian of the animals and that, and she talked him into joining up with Gilgamesh, and he was called Enkidu, but I believe that Enkidu was actually his name was Enkidu, but from that point on, all these wild hairy men, women of the forest were called Enkidu. So I think that's the first name for Bigfoot was Enkidu. But all through ancient texts, it talks about these giant humans that were covered in hair that preferred to be away from humans and live among nature. And apparently when Enkidu and Gilgamesh got together, they went about, attacking neighboring countries and stuff like that. And they lost this big battle, and the god stepped in and says, okay, you guys are going to be punished. We're separating you out. And with Enkidu, he says he sent him into earth, into the depths of earth, where he would remain. Well, that would be the cave systems. Okay.
Yeah, and there are caves, there are tunnels and caves that we don't.
And so Enkidu said that's fine by him, because he says from this day forward we will never have anything to do with man again. And I think that they've held true to their promise, that they drifted aside. It's a parallel human type race. Okay, a giant race that evolved right parallel with us humans, but with us though, as we evolved, all the knowledge of the gods had been taken away from us. We lost all that knowledge, whereas the Enkidu or the Bigfoot maintained, because they wasn't brought up the way we were, they maintained all that knowledge. So they have all the knowledge of the forest and all the knowledge, of how to open doorways, portals to go into all these other dimensions. They have the knowledge of how to make themselves invisible or to shapeshift,
Do you think that just perhaps science is so wrong trying to create a link from monkeys to humans, and that really there were so many different species here on the planet that humans perhaps came in as humans? They didn't evolve from anything, and the giants came in as giants. And
I agree with you totally. I mean, why not?
Well, it makes more sense to me than trying to make one whole string of, here's how we evolved from this to this.
Common sense is, they say monkeys evolved into humans. Well, if that's the case, then how come they're still monkeys?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So I think that we may have looked somewhat different, but I don't think so. I remember a time that they used to show, the Neanderthal man as, or the Cro-Magnon man as like a caveman, with the, stooped over, hairy, with a big browed forehead. And now they realize that no, that wasn't the case at all. They look just like us today. know, and now they're depicting them like us today, you know, wearing maybe skins or whatever, but, you know, but you know, the thing was, they portrayed the Neanderthal man, which is Cro-Magnon man. They described them exactly the same way as they described Indians, North American Indians,
Yeah.
when they described them to people in Europe and that,
Yeah, exactly.
you know, because they wanted to make them look unintelligent, subhuman.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they changed the agenda, you know, when they killed a lot of them off, got their land, then they made them beautiful people. But up until that point in time, they made them look just like how they made the cavemen look when we were growing up.
Yeah, it's you know, the education system today is just what it's teaching the children is just so not true. It's horrifying.
Well, my grandson, you know, because I've seen the Bigfoot. I'm a Bigfoot hunter. You know, I go out there, you know, and I search for them, and I've actually, you know, I've been rushed by them. I've had rocks thrown at me. I've been howled at. You know, I've gathered footprints and found the structures. You know, I mean, there's no doubt that they're out there. And so, anyhow, when my little grandson, he went to kindergarten, and he was telling the kids about Bigfoot, and the teacher took him off to the side and says, "Don't you ever talk about Bigfoot here. That's nothing but a lie." Then contacted his parents and had a meeting with the parents, which is my son and his wife, and told them that Bigfoot was nothing but a story, and she did not want him in school ever again talking about Bigfoot, or he would be reprimanded. And she said, "I don't care if you talk about it at home, but I do not want him believing in them enough where, you know, he talks about them at school." Well,
Wow.
okay. Well, so much for killing a kid's imagination.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, even if it wasn't true, the teacher, she was deciding as to how this little kindergarten boy used his imagination.
Well, teachers are not teaching kids to think or to reason anymore. They're cramming false history down their heads, and they're making them they're dumbing them down, which scares the heck out of me.
And they're not even taking into this is what scares me about it, is they're not taking into consideration that a child's brain develops into adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
So a child in preschool or pre-kindergarten does not have the brain evolved as of an adult, but they discipline the child as if he or she did. And, you know, because when a child's preschool, they don't understand consequences of their actions. You know, they just act out, you know, which they should, because that's part of the development is acting out. But now the kids act out and they're punished, even having police officers come to schools and take them out with handcuffs for acting out.
They're programming them, and you know, it's when you go back
to
either
that or the teachers do not recognize the fact that a child's brain is still developing and cannot be held on the same level as a brain that has developed to the point of understanding consequences for their actions.
That's true too. No, it's when you look at how children were taught, you know, long ago. They were taught by their parents. They were homeschooled. They were taught by personal experience with their parents. And you go back to the Native Americans. You go back to, you know, the further back you go, the better the education actually was.
Right.
So.
Well, I'm an author. I got 7 books out. I'm working on 3 more. And the reason for it is because I remember as a child sitting on my dad's knee and Dad telling me all these wonderful stories, you know, princesses, you know, and unicorns and whatnot, right? But he did that so to help, well, I don't know if he did it deliberately or not, but it developed my imagination to the point where I'm today right using my imagination, as always questioning things, you know, wanting to know more, you know, regardless. And in children today, if it's they'll try to act out something out of using their imagination and say something, and people will say, well, that's a lie. You're a bad person because you lied. Now go sit in the corner. Well, no. Let them use their imagination, as long as it's not hurting somebody, of course.
Sure.
But you know, the neat part about imagination, because you know how people always say, well, you know, that's just your imagination. Because you say, well, I seen a Bigfoot, or, you know, I seen a UFO, or whatever, you know, I seen a ghost, whatever. And people will look at you and they'll say, well, that's just your imagination. To me, I say, thank you. Because remember before I was saying about how you take words, you know, they're anagrams, and how you take the words, you split them into roots, you know. And if you break down the word imagination, it says, I am a nation of Magi.
Well, that's cool.
What did Magi do? They were the ones that were responsible for the magic that's brought into the world. So that is a good thing, right?
Oh, God. Absolutely.
I'm a nation of Magi. Oh, my God. Thank you.
Well, you know, the thing is, if you don't believe in the magic, then you take away the fact that you are capable of the magic. I mean,
Because thoughts create.
Absolutely. And the reality is we have the potential inside of us for amazing things. And
well, don't you think that is one of the things that they fear the most, is because whoever these controllers are that are making up this agenda, creating these little human robots, they know who we are. They know that we're a nation of Magi. They know that through our thoughts we can create great things. You know, and so we are their biggest enemy, because if we ever came to understand who we were, they would lose all power over us.
Yeah, Patrick used to say that we are who we've been waiting for.
We are.
And I truly believe that. I believe that within each of us is the potential for, it's unlimited. It truly is unlimited, and it's just, you know, we stand in our own way by our fear of you know, people judging us. But the reality here is that, you know, now I'm not saying that you know, everybody can go out and levitate tomorrow morning, but I am saying.
They could. I mean, if they really believed in the magic, and they could you know, control how they vibrate. They could control their frequency.
Well,
aren't there? Think they could.
Come on, there are Tibetan priests that can control their breathing so that they only have to take a breath once every 15 or 20 minutes. There have been people that have, you know, worked at and developed the ability to do amazing things, and we all have that potential. Everyone has the same potential. And it's kind
but we
of
don't. Well, that's why your show is so important, and other shows like yours, is because people, they become conscious of what they're capable of.
And it's amazing. It's truly, and it's amazing. I know that people will say to me, you know, how do you do what you do? And it's you know, I tell them it's like a muscle. You work on it and you develop it, and it becomes, you know, it serves you better and better and better. And it's training, and it's working at it. It's nothing comes easy, but nothing is impossible either. So it's a matter of, what do you want to commit yourself to? And lots of people don't want to do the work, and that's okay. But
well, yeah, I totally agree with you. And like I'm on the same path as you, I'm sure. And when I discovered my power per se, and I was able to start looking past that veil and understanding how, the universe works with synchronicity and how miracles really do happen, and we can travel in our mind and we can create this and we can create that. It was just like the whole world opened up to me, and it was so exciting. I couldn't wait until, I was awake again so that I could experience and watch the birds coming in, as signs, or a penny, finding a penny on the ground, or, all these little synchronicities, a butterfly flying by me, knowing that this was the universe actually speaking to me, giving me signs, showing me the way for this or that,
Oh, yeah.
And it's just, when you discover that world, oh my God, you could never, people get afraid and they say, well, I can't do that, I'm afraid. But they don't understand, once you've experienced that magic in life, and you give yourself permission to just be able to ask, and realize that you will receive, and ask questions and get answers. And I mean, you'll never go back to the old way. You couldn't.
No, and the other fable that I am happily living through myself is that the older you get, the more active your mind is, the younger you really are.
Yeah.
And so many people, I have a friend who was a scientist, and when she retired, she just stopped doing anything, and she's now going into dementia. And it's sort of like, holy mackerel. There's so much out there to learn. There's, you kind of say there's not enough time, but you cram in as much as you possibly can, because it's exciting, and it increases your vibration, it increases the intensity, it increases the vibrancy that you look at life with. Everything changes. And
I remember when I lived down in Arizona, Arizona and California, there's not such a thing as old age. Everybody's just out there having way too much fun, right? And, and you wanted to say youthful looking, and athletic, because you wanted to climb those mountains and surf and whatever, or just be with your friends for the day, right? And you would see that all these women, they just looked young, regardless of their age. They just had that energy about them, that lightness, in their walk even. There was a briskness, an energy.
Oh, yeah.
And then you would go, and you'd look across, because I used to live in Arizona. And so, but I also lived in Wisconsin. Now I'm back into Wisconsin, Illinois area. But see, in the Midwest, they're taught differently. You're done at 40, pretty much. Kids are raised, and you just watch these women. They just kind of they bend over when they're walking. They're usually on an average of 20, 30, maybe even 40 pounds heavier, They cut their hair short, do the wave permanence, whatever, and it's just like 40 is young, for God's sakes,
Yeah.
60, 70 is young in California, Arizona, New Mexico. But here, 40 gets old, and you watch them because they've been programmed this way. So they just it's just like you can just slowly see this whole thing kind of like smoke just kind of settling down over their body.
Well, just because you retire doesn't
now
mean you have to be retiring.
In the last years, though. But in the last 10 years, though, I've noticed it since the internet actually started up, you know, because now people, once the internet was up, people were able to communicate back and forth. So from the Midwest talking to the people from the, you know, the West Coast and that, and they're all sharing pictures. And now here in the Midwest, all of a sudden people are starting to eat better instead of just mashed potatoes and meat, and cakes for dessert and ice cream and a gallon of milk. They're starting to eat better, and they're exercising. And now most of your Midwestern women are pretty much, they can pretty much go to California and blend right in. But it's all a matter of how you think about yourself and how the society has convinced you as to who you are. People don't see, I teach empowerment, self-empowerment. I tell people, don't go to somebody else and ask them what they think of what you thought, because the thought's coming from you.
Right.
You have to go inside and find out from you what you thought. Go to yourself and say, did I see a UFO? Or was that really a Bigfoot I saw? Can't go someplace else, second, third, fourth party, and tell them that you've seen a Bigfoot and then try to have them tell you if you really saw a Bigfoot, or was it something that escaped from a zoo, because you were the only person that saw it.
Right.
How do they know what you saw or what you felt?
Yeah, and society is strange, because I know I did in the 60s see a UFO, and the kind of teasing and almost abuse that I got, where people telling me I was crazy, I couldn't possibly have seen it, and I kept saying, no, I know what I saw, and you don't have to believe me, but I know what I saw, and I'm very secure in what I saw, and I'm not nuts. And 40 years later, it was documented that there actually was one there, and I have to admit that there was a great sense of relief that it had been documented, but it was something I was not going to let people bully me out of, because I did see something.
Well, I get phone calls all the time, because I also do paranormal and UFO research, and I get call-ins all the time. First thing people will say, you may think I'm crazy, but, right? But they've been so conditioned to be ridiculed. And I can honestly say my parents, they brought me up to feel confident in myself and self-empowered. And it's like, I'm just one of those people, when I see something, nobody's going to tell me I didn't see it. If I experience something, nobody's ever going to tell me I didn't experience it. It's like I'm very secure in what I see, what I hear, what I feel, what I know. And I'm not afraid to go against the consensus of the public, as to what's real and what's not. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do the books I do.
Well, that's for sure. And you have a very understanding husband too. He is your partner in crime.
Oh, for sure. He's an earth angel. He's right there. I mean, totally open-minded. I mean, I had him the other night howling at the moon. Remember, we had that beautiful full moon?
Oh yeah.
And I said, Brad, look at that moon. He says, yeah. I said, howl at it. What? I said, howl at the moon. And he said, well, there's neighbors. I said, forget about the neighbors. Howl. And he goes, oh. He looks at the moon and goes, oh. I said, well, that's a puppy whoop if I've ever seen one. But he did it,
It's a start.
Yeah, he's open-minded to everything.
Well, now,
but even, jokingly aside, have you ever noticed if you howl at the moon, there's this, there's a reason wolves howl at the moon and the coyotes, because when you howl, it brings something, I don't know if it's the primitive nature of yourself or what, but it seems to pull something out of you and releases it to the moon.
Could be.
You know,
It does. It
a long howl.
there
You know.
is that sound vibration that will definitely release stuff from you if you. Well, that's they've got scream therapy, so I would think it would be the same thing. You just you release whatever it is that is making you uncomfortable.
Well, when next time there's a full moon,
I will go howl.
just just get a nice long soft howl or a loud. It depends, but there's just something about it after you get done with the howls. There's a release there. There's all of a sudden it just feels like everything's okay with the world. I don't know what it is.
Well,
but that'd be something. Otherwise, the wolves and coyotes wouldn't be doing it.
Well, I would agree with you on that one.
And don't make my husband do a puppy wolf howl. No puppy howls. Just get a nice long one. But
wow. I think there is so much with nature that we have forgotten and that we're not connected to. I know there's a movement called earthing that talks about you need to walk barefoot on the bare ground to synchronize your heartbeat with that of the planet, so that you
well,
become.
It's like when you work in the garden. People say, well, it's so relaxing to walk in the garden. The dirt itself has some sort of bacteria in it that when you get your hands in it and you start stirring it up, same way with the feet, it releases that bacteria that somehow works, with your brain, that causes a release of what is that? Melatonin, I think. Is it not? No, serotonin, I think it is.
Serotonin, yes.
Yeah, and it releases that, so it gives you that feeling of grounding, that like you said, that oneness. And,
oh yeah.
So it's very, very calming, and like a tree too. Like if you have a lot of stress, you just lean up against the tree, put your back up against that tree, and just kind of become one with that tree. And that tree's designed in a way, what it does is it pulls all that negative out of you, and then it takes it down into the root system, and which is in the dirt, and it cleans it up. And then it sends it back up through the root, up through the tree, and then releases it through the upper branches back into the sky. And you'll see, again, it takes away pain, it helps you to relax. And then if you need energy, have you ever seen how a dog or an animal will go out into the grass and they scratch on the grass, And what that is same thing. It energizes the grass.
Yeah.
What you do is you go out there barefooted and you just kind of shuffle your feet through that grass.
Mm-hmm.
And it releases, again, something from the grass that goes up into your brain, and it energizes you. And that's why a dog will always go out and scratch, and then they roll into the grass for energy.
I thought they were just scratching fleas, but that does make sense.
No, they're pulling energy.
No, that makes great sense. Animals are a lot smarter than we give them credit for.
Well, the thing is, they're smarter than us. It's like the Bigfoot when the Enkidu, when they separated from us. See, they retained all that knowledge, and see, we don't have that knowledge anymore because it's been schooled out of us. So that's why we need to go back and start watching nature again and understanding it.
I don't think we've lost it. I think it's just hidden. Mary, thank you so much tonight. This was so much fun.
Thank you, listeners. I hope you buy my books, okay? And